Well, I call it fluid. I would call it fluid motion, like they're like water kind of. I don't, fluid motion, and they're so fast, light speed fast.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people, because these angels or angelic forces or nature spirits, as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
And all of a sudden I hear him go, whoa, or, something like that. So I look up, and as I look up, I see this thing.
And I said, I've never seen a butterfly like you before.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
As soon as I spoke to it, it turns around and makes eye contact with me. And then it stands upright.
And it was at that moment that I saw it was like an orange light appear above this row of trees. And from this sort of orange light, this thing appeared. Its wings were actually like sycamore leaf shaped.
And I started talking to them. I'm like, hi, are y'all the dwarves? And I would hear whispers that would say, hi, yeah, you want to play? And it wasn't just my imagination. And I had told them, I'm like, my dwarves, they like beer, And my dad's like, yeah, sure, your dwarves like beer. And they were holding a conversation, and his beer slid upwards instead of downwards, how the house was tilted. And him and my brothers jumped up.
So I stopped calling out Adam, and I'm just my mind draws a blank, and I stop behind that tree stump. I'm pretty close to it now because I took a few steps forward, and I see this thing.
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. Tonight, we're traveling to Colorado to talk with Terry. Terry, how are things going in Colorado tonight?
Doing great, thank you.
I really appreciate you being here, Terry, and I'm excited to talk with you for, some pretty cool reasons that we were chatting in the pre-conversation and, before when we were talking through Messenger. Terry tonight is going to be talking about his own personal experiences and also referring to some video footage and still imagery that he has captured in his pursuit of knowledge on this subject matter. But Terry, let me just do for 1 minute my introduction, which I do at the start of every episode, because you never know who's tuning in and listening for the first time. So here on Fascinating Fae, we do not try to convince anybody of anything. The Bigfoot phenomena, the fairy phenomena, it's all, an enigma wrapped in a mystery, and no one really knows the answer to a lot of this stuff. So there's no pressure here to convince anybody of anything. That's my first, kind of rule that I like to set for these conversations. The second thing I like to say is I think it's brave to talk about this stuff. As we were talking about in the pre-conversation, you're not always going to get the best reactions from people when you tell your story. As true as it is, it can still bring about a negative consequence. So it is brave to talk about this subject matter, and I really appreciate that you've been willing to do that. So thank you for that. And then finally, truly I mean it. It's not just a platitude. Enough things have happened in my own life that I really take the value of a story seriously, and so I try my best to really make sure people know I respect them. I think it's brave to come forward, and I'm listening with a constructive and objective ear. And then finally, just the only other thing I like to tell people is it's my interview style that I don't really like to interrupt my guests. I like to let anybody talking to me have a lot of time and space to explain everything that makes it makes sense to them, so that we can understand it the same way you do. So to what extent you want to introduce yourself, to what extent you want to give background, context, starting with childhood experiences and working chronologically is usually a pretty good way to do it. But I'm here to listen to, the whole thing, basically, without much interruption. I won't leave you hanging, Terry. I'll jump in and ask questions here and there. But for the most part, I'm just here to listen to the bulk of what you've got to say. And when you're finished, I'll jump in then with offering analysis and asking questions. And by analysis, I really just mean maybe sharing with you things I've heard from other people I've talked to, because I don't consider myself an expert. I'm just really a good listener and an experiencer myself. So with all that said, Terry, if you'd be so kind as to maybe just go back to where we were a moment ago in the pre-conversation and start maybe by telling me about your first Bigfoot experience, if that's what makes sense for you to start in with. If there's something else you'd like to start in with, by all means, but that's a good as place as any as far as I'm concerned, because it was such a cool story. If you'd like to start there again, that'd be great.
Sure. My name's Terry Gallegos. I live in southwestern Colorado. My very first experience was at age 10 on a end of the year school field trip where we went down a place called Canyon of the Ancients, and we were studying Anasazi ruins that one of the alumni from our school, they owned a farm down there, and they had all of these really similar to Mesa Verde. We're about 20 miles from the Mesa Verde area. And as we were walking through, kids were in single file and whatnot, and we were checking out these ruins. And on our field trip, well, this big, huge bipedal, furry being took the classic 3 steps in front of us and leaped off of an invert. I'm guessing it had to have been at least 100-foot, bailed off the side of a cliff. And then we ran to the edge of the cliff to see, because we'd seen it, and then it disappeared immediately, and only a few of us seen it, a selected few. And the one that was in front of me, the kid that was in front of me, he was really close to it, and he got a really good look at it, and we were kind of really, really amazed by it. So we told the teachers, and they kind of really just blew us off. But I also, at that time had been hunting and whatnot, and I noticed the footprints, and they were huge, and they were barefooted. There were 5 toes, and just this dark figure that bailed off, classic Bigfoot 3-step thing, and then it vanished. Well, my friend went to the school. He is known as he's a police sketch artist now, but he was a really good artist even as a kid. And he drew a picture of it. And there was some distinguishing figures, like it had white fur tufts kind of on its shoulders that went to a V on his chest. And doing research in some of the other groups that I've been invited to and whatnot, that's a characteristic of one of the older Bigfoots. Now, a lot of people have misconception that Bigfoot and Sasquatch are the same, which from what I have learned in my research, that they are not. The Bigfoot is a celestial terrestrial being, which they can jump in and out of the ether, and kind of like the fairies do and whatnot. And then your Sasquatch is your typical Harry and the Hendersons version with kind of man-like face. They're stinky, they're smelly, and whatnot. Well, my unique thing about this is that, well, I went home, I told my mom about it, and she goes, you're really special, because not a lot of people experience that type of thing. And then when my dad came home, well, I told him the story, and he thought I was making up stories and telling lies, so I was reprimanded for it. And then I spent the last 30 or 40 years trying to show him the proofs and things and whatnot of these beings. I've had David Hollis come down and film some videos with me. All of the groups that I am in, I've been invited. These are research groups that were allowed to be able to, under the name of research, discuss these things on Facebook. And every group that I've been in, I've been invited by the head administrator, Del Denton, he's the Tennessee Bigfoot man, and David Hollis. There's also Tim Turner, and he does a Bigfoot research group in Florida. Just many groups that I administrate, and they call me an expert, but actually, like you said, in this field, it's all a learning process. Nobody's really an expert because we're just gaining knowledge of these things. I believe they can travel within the ether, and they also, the celestial terrestrials, they belong here. I noticed big footprints step off of our porch, and I put up what would be a notebook. I wish I had a higher quality camera, but still, these things are able to manipulate photos. They're able to cloak. They're able to morph, and they're able to adhere to like a chair and things that you wouldn't even know to be invisible. And they always seem to be like a shadow figure, but in my experience, they have iridescent fur, and I think that makes it where they're invisible to our eye, but the pixelization of our new modern technology can pick them up off of our phones and whatnot. But what I did was my experience with the Bigfoot after my first, and I started doing a lot of research about them. I set up a camera trap right in front of my door. And as I stepped out onto the porch, I went to grab a beverage box that I had, and this big, huge arm thing. Now, I didn't even know it. I didn't know it was behind me. I couldn't hear it or anything. But it reaches, and I think what happened was the baby Bigfoot might have been playing with my beverages, and she was either putting them back or something like that. But I set it on the floor. She does a vocalization, and I pick up an armload of wood, and I step inside the house. Well, as soon as I step inside of the house and close the door, she comes out, picks up two baby Bigfoot, and I had to slow it down. I had to do a lot of editing, and the film is really, really dark because it's outside on a dark porch, and I've got size comparison references of the being, and then she walks into my house. And a lot of people say, well, that's insane. That's crazy. And I thought the same thing. At first, I was really afraid, that they were attempting to maybe because I had a newborn son. Well, he was like 5 or 6 months old. And then as he grew older, he could actually see them and communicate with them. He comes up with this word alfalfa. And I've got a live interview, and so does David Hollis when he came down to videotape me, about him telling us the names of the Bigfoot. And I go, really? And what do these Bigfoot do? And he's showing me this big furry foot. He's got an Elmo foot. He's like 1 year old explaining these things to me. I go, well, where are they at now? And he gets up and walks to the window, and he starts pointing out the window and whatnot. Well, these things are extremely fast. In fact, at one time I was trying to take a video of a footprint on the ground, and 3 times my phone shut off. And I'm like, what in the world is up with my phone? Well, during one time, I actually captured its hand underneath. The camera picked it up. And I said, that's what happened. But they're so fast, they can run by you, shut your phone off, or delete your photos, or like I said, they can manipulate. And people ask, why are all the Bigfoot photos blurry? Well, they operate on a different frequency often. And I have a lot of respect. I know that they don't like their faces filmed and whatnot, but I've got live movement video of them in our house. I've got photos of my son interacting with them. And he was the one that told us what their names were because he could actually communicate with them. Now that he's older, I think they do the erase your mind thing or something. They're able to do that as well, because when I captured one, I just shut off the lights and I was filming in the house, and I got this feeling to film over my shoulder, and I turned a certain way and I caught him, and it was like he didn't know what to do, but it was an adolescent Bigfoot, and I've got him in quite a few photos. But I was immediately going to run to my wife and say, guess what? I got him finally. I captured it on video. But then I didn't remember that for a few days later after I was going through my film or my videos. I found it. And I'm like, I remember that. And I was going to run and tell her about it. And, but they can actually even erase your memory or your thoughts or your patterns. They can make you feel anxiety. The thing about it is that I kind of think it's funny, and they say, well, I barely made it out of there with my life. These things are so fast. If they wanted to hurt human beings and whatnot, they absolutely could. I believe they're protectors because I've traced the ones that I have had found clear back to the oldest photo that I have, and that was my mom and dad's wedding photo. And these beings, if you know what to look for, they kind of rainbow hue out, and it's kind of typical of these beings, and that's what gives them away, and that's why it's easier to find them. There's people that can just see them on a photo, but the majority of people are unable to see them, even if you've got a circle around them and have them pointed out. They're right here. So that's another complication that people have. And the other thing is people are kind of things that they don't understand. Then they get really, that's where we get the troll people that, oh, you don't know what you're seeing. You must be crazy. They call it, whatever that thing is where you see things, but it's always there. Pareidolia or whatever that is. In fact, I was about to give up because the trolls were eating me up in a Bigfoot group. And, I have a photo, which is a street view from Google Earth, street view capture of one actually in mid stride. You can see the bottom of its foot running as, I guess it's the Google Earth filming thing that goes by or takes all these street view things. And it's a mid stride. You can see the bottom of its feet. And I could also measure it from the satellite because on Google Earth 3D, you're able to measure distances and whatnot. And it's 15 foot tall and has a 36-inch foot. And it's right next door to the house that I live in. And less than probably 100 yards, that photo was taken. And now they've changed it, so it's like a 2020 Google Earth capture that I have of it. It's definitely Google Earth, and I've gone. In fact, the reason that I went to Google Earth is because I wanted to see. I noticed at another place I lived down the road, there were like giant-sized footprints. So I went to look to see if I could find them off of the satellite and whatnot. And I found that I can find Bigfoot just about any place I look. I've been from my little city here to cities around us, and not only just in the main cities, as well as clear to Australia. So to find them, it's kind of, and a lot of people won't question because they're not looking for, something that's 9 foot tall. We have a place that has statues. Probably about a mile or two away. They sell things like that, statues, and whatnot. And they had a Bigfoot, and I know the lady personally because of a business that we have. We have done mobile homes in the area for like some 40 years, and we moved mobile homes for this lady. And I called her up and I said, "Hey, that statue that you have out there of your Bigfoot, do you know how tall or how big it is?" She goes, "Well, it's supposedly a replica of the world record, which would be the Patty or the Patterson video. They call her Patty, and she says it's supposed to be the world record. I don't remember how tall it is. I'll go out there and measure it for you and call me back in a little bit." So I called her back, and as soon as she started to say how big it was, I go, "Is it 9 foot by 4 foot by any chance?" She goes, "That's exactly how tall it is. How did you know that?" I said, "I'm pretty good at guessing. Actually, I measured it from the satellite to see how accurate the measuring device was." and it's extremely accurate because it was right 9 foot by 4 foot, and that's the record. And then the footprint, the record, and this is 1967. The record for the footprint is 20 inches. So the one that I've got the photo of would be a world record because he's 15 foot tall, and that's our alpha male. And I've got him in quite a few photos and on video as well. Yeah, he's 15 foot tall, and they can run like so fast you wouldn't even believe it. And I've got different proof of that. And anything that I say, I've got either video evidence or photo evidence to back what I say. Now, the fairy capture that I caught, that you were interested in and you asked about, it was really cold, so I know that it very much probably wasn't a hummingbird. And the fact that our cameras have audio on it, and a hummingbird will make a humming noise, and it was just there for a split second. It didn't come from anywhere, like it just appeared, like you said, and then it immediately realized that there was a camera there, and then disappeared. And then while trying to film some of the Bigfoot activity that I had in my house, I had a baby monitor, and I was filming on a baby monitor with an iPhone to capture the living room. And I also caught some type of being that reminded me of Tinkerbell. It was flying around, and for a split second it stopped, like where my microphone was, and then it just vanished. And then the little trail that they leave, like pixie dust. And I'm certain that it probably had to have been a fairy. And so that's two captures that I got. I've also caught orbs in my house, the Bigfoot, some other weird looking, I don't know, I call it a reptile or something that the baby was watching. And he could communicate with his beings. He started, his very first word, it was mom and alfalfa. And I'm like, alfalfa? He's never watched The Little Rascals or anything like that. I said, Junior, where did you learn this word alfalfa? And he goes, he's my buddy. He's my friend. And we live on a hay farm. So you would think, alfalfa might be a good name for a baby Bigfoot. And he also told us that dad's name was Alpha. So alfalfa, he will probably graduate to be Alpha. The other thing I know about them is that they generally, when they have their offspring, they have twins. And I've got baby Bigfoot prints around, like I said, and then I've got the capture of where the female picks up two baby Bigfoot and walks into our house. And I think what it was doing was trying to keep the babies warm. And at first, my first encounter, when I was walking through the hallway, and I seen this thing that kind of looked like a predator when it morphed, and it was kind of like behind a mirror, kind of, and I like seen it. And I was getting ready to put some wood in the fire, and I was eating some pistachios, and I had shells in my hand. I had full shells in my hand. I was getting ready to load up the firewood because we use wood heat to heat our hum. And when I seen it, I had the full pistachios in my hand, and I threw it at it. Well, immediately it came back, and then the pistachios flew down the hallway right back at me. And I said, aha, I knew I seen you. I know you're here. And I think you must belong or something, and I don't want any problems, and I don't want you scaring my friends or family. I'm going to go back inside the room and say, I'm going to come out now, and try not to show yourself because you're really freaking me out. And since that time, I kind of blew it with them, I think, because I haven't really, I can capture them on camera and video and stuff. And like I said, I've got multiple footprints, places that I've caught them. I know that they stalk the deer. So, and they also make a footprint. So if they make a footprint, they belong here. I tried to throw them out of my house, and this is one thing about them. They do not smell. They do not frighten my guests. Well, there was one little gal that was coming up my steps with a bad attitude, and one growled at her, and she ran back to her car and said, I'm not coming in until you come and get me, because something growled at me on your porch. And I know this is either a portal area or something that they stay in or inhabit, because I've got a lot of activity there. And I've got surveillance cameras now where I picked up some really weird things, but nothing so far as good as my camera trap video. I've got them flying by our window at like warp speed, and then the photos of the babies. And I've got the same type of photos of the same type of beings, um, the same the same creature in different places. So yeah, the sky's the limit on these things, and I believe what it is they're able to jump in and out of the ether. They have like what I call angelic attributes, and I've got lots of personal experience with them. I've got photos, a video, Polaroid photo of my mom and my grandma and my dad in church. And there's some type of being that's right next to my grandma's feet, and she's, an elderly lady that would be way past her comfort level had she known that was there. And then between my mom and my dad on this Polaroid, I found it in the Bible that made it through 2 house fires. And I think that was, once again, my mom explained to me that these things have been around for a while. I also had something protect me as I was walking in the city. And I have photo evidence of it as well, of these 2 things. I hear this big voice that says run as I'm filming what I would believe to be maybe a UFO, but it's over a mobile home park. And then when I brought the video home and zoomed in, you can absolutely tell that the being behind it is either an angel or a Nephilim or something, because you can see the eye sockets in a beard. And as this other creature is about to grab me, I hear this big voice that says, run, in a deep, big voice. And I hear this collision happen. And it was an advisor lady that's in one of the Bigfoot groups that we call them seers, if they're able to see these things. She's a seer, and she's also one of my top advisors. She says, well, the equivalent of what plays on the bed, the adult version of what plays on the bed with your son, is running into this being. And I said, yeah, I heard something told me to run, and it collided into it. I was so terrified, I ran 13 city blocks sprinting without stopping. And then I sent the video to my wife. I said, if anything happens to me, it had something to do with this, but I'm not going back that way. I'm going to go the long, long way back home, because it was about 3 o'clock in the morning and she was having munchie issues. And I was walking to the convenience store to pick her up something to munch on. And that's when I had this experience, which I believe is a Nephilim and perhaps a Wendigo, but it was about to grab me. It was close enough to grab me. And I have nighttime, or the photo of it, and then I have a photo of the daytime thing, and it was towering over mobile homes some 20 foot.
There's so many interesting things that you've shared, and what I'll do is just to help focus the conversation a little bit. I'm going to ask you some questions and say a few things, if that's okay with you, because you've already said a bunch of stuff that really gets my head working, and I want to just kind of share and yeah, just tell you what comes up for me. First of all, great storytelling. I really appreciate the level of detail and the amount of experiences you've had. I find your analysis of the 2 kinds of definition of Bigfoot extremely interesting. The Bigfoot being the more celestial terrestrial. By the way, great term.
Right, thank you.
I don't know if that's your term or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's my term, celestial terrestrial. Right, they can be in the air, or they can be on the ground.
Honestly, what a great term.
Thank you.
I really mean that. That's a great term. That'll be the name of this episode, actually. It's such a great term.
Thank you.
And then the contrasting Sasquatch, which is more, if I'm understanding your analysis correctly, like a flesh and blood type creature. Mm-hmm. Not that they are without their own special capabilities, but one is, I think, more encountered frequently in its terrestrial form, which I think is the Sasquatch, if I follow you.
Right. They have to be on the earth all the time. They're smelly. They're like the skunk ape or the grass man and whatnot. And the Bigfoot itself, like I said, has what I would call an angelic attributes.
Okay, well, let's just kind of stick on this part of the subject matter for a second. So I am often confused when I hear conflicting narratives about what Sasquatch is, and it may boil down to a grouping of two separate entities into one identification, which I think is probably the reason why there's that conflicting viewpoint on whether these things are, capable of doing angelic or interdimensional tasks, for lack of a better word, or if they're just strictly linked to, the earth as any other animal is. Now, something I didn't mention to you, but I have seen one, and I saw a very, very large one. I would put it at north of 13 to 14 feet, because I was driving a UPS truck when it happened. And they're quite high off the ground. They're not really that much lower of a seated position than a big rig. And this thing was jumping across the road in front of my vehicle when I was traveling up a mountain pass. And when it moved in front of my vehicle, it just moves so fast that it's hard to really compute and to like, the only other thing I've ever seen move like that Sasquatch was the fairy that I saw in 2019. And I saw this Sasquatch in 2022, about 3 years after the fact. And immediately upon witnessing the Sasquatch, it was like my brain just immediately was like, that moved just like the fairy. Like, it's too smooth, it's too fast, it's too precise. And I've seen that. And there's also like the weird matter of like the approach that this thing was coming on was up a fairly steep incline and would have thwarted any speed from any other animal. Like any other thing or animal would have been struggling to come up a grade like that. So, I actually think that a lot of what you've said there tracks with my own experiences and my own hypothesis around the subject matter, which is that I think that Bigfoot, like you're saying, is a kind of interdimensional, which in my books makes it a fae or a fairy.
Right.
And having spoken now to maybe like close to 100 people over 2 years, specifically reaching out to primarily people that have seen fairies or fae, a large number of them describe this unearthly speed and precision of movement in fae. So people have seen like, ogres, people have seen trolls, people have seen gnomes, people have seen winged fae, and all of them are moving extremely fast, extremely precise, unnaturally so. But still, it's movement. It's still like real movement, for lack of a better word.
Well, I call it fluid. I would call it fluid motion, like they're like water kind of. Fluid motion, and they're so fast, light speed fast.
One of my favorite things is when myself and a guest struggle to give voice to how fast and smooth they are. It's too smooth, it's too fast, it's too precise, and it's one of the weirdest things about them. I wonder to myself, are they using a type of, well, okay, first of all, allowing for the fact that they exist as a type of entity that has different makeup than we do, right?
Right.
Thinking about it in terms of how we move and trying to translate that into how they move might just be naive and a non-starter. But are they moving their limbs that fast, or are they, through some type of telekinesis, moving themselves that fast by their mind, by their intention, their will, whatever you want to assign to it? Are they able to just kind of like, say, I want to go here, and instead of using real locomotion, they're kind of propelling themselves from some internal energy source or some ability to manipulate physics because of the way that their very makeup is structured. It's a really interesting part of it, is like, how are they moving that fast? Is it real locomotion that we just can't perceive because it's so fast, or is it something different? Like, is it a type of telekinetic locomotion? I'm wondering what you think about that, if you have any thoughts or opinions.
From my understanding, I was sent a video that I will send to you. It's my TikTok videos, but the lady was a friend of mine from a Bigfoot group, and she sent it to me. She goes, I don't even know what to do with this, but I want to give you the rights to it, and if there's anything that you can do with it, please be my guest. So I put it up on my TikTok page, and it's 2 of them, and they are interacting so synchronized and together that it's phenomenal. In fact, I leave it up to, to the people who are witnessing it. I kind of make it, has anybody had an experience like this before? What do you think these are? Are they lightning bugs? Are they interdimensional beings? Are they perhaps something, and you have to be really careful what you say on TikTok because, anything controversial will get you red flagged and whatnot. So I make it up to them. What do you think these are? And most everybody has said, I believe you've captured either alien type of beings or because of their synchroninity. I mean, they were like playing around like, like two little kids flying around like, and they're absolutely really acrobatic, aero acrobatics is what I call it. But I also believe that they probably transfer in and out of the ether somehow and are able to travel at that speed. And it just bewilders me how fast and how speedy they actually are. Because the one that I sent you, the video I sent you, it was there for one split second, and you didn't see a wing flutter or a beat or anything, and then it was immediately was gone. And it didn't show a direction that it went towards. It was just there, and then it wasn't. In fact, I was really surprised that I caught it on the monitor, but something had triggered it on my surveillance video, and I checked it and I go, what in the world was that? And then it could, a lot of people were saying, well, that's quite possibly a hummingbird, but I know for a fact hummingbirds weren't around during that time because they're not around in winter. We don't catch them, we don't get them back from the south till a little later in the year. And the fact that it didn't make any noise or anything, it just like appeared, like you said, so methodically and fluidly, and then it was gone instantly. It's like, oh, and it's right in front of the camera. So I think what it was doing was waiting to come into the house or something, and waiting for an opportunity, and it didn't realize that I had put up the cameras then, and it was like oops, and then it was gone. So for it to happen that quick and there not be a flutter or a wing beat or a direction that it took just amazes me, like you said with your encounter.
I was compelled by your video for that reason. And, video evidence can be dubious. It can be difficult to interpret. And you said something earlier, which I also think is really interesting, about how some people can see these images clearly in a photograph or video, and others struggle to see it when there's a circle around them. Correspondingly, certain people might be in the physical presence of one of these things and have the ability to perceive them, and be standing next to somebody who does not. That is something that occurs as well. And I wonder if that is a genetic thing about the viewer. As you said, you mentioned a seer, I think was how you put it.
Right, that's what we call them in the Bigfoot, among the Bigfoot people. We call people that are able to see these things in photos a seer. Now, a lot of people can see them outright. There are times that I can, or like Junior himself, the younger children and stuff. And a lot of people will call him a shadow person or a shadow being. Well, I've also got them outside stalking the deer. And like I said, these things can morph, they can cloak, they can be invisible to your eye, but the pixelization of the camera picks them up, and they're extremely fast. And like I said, I've got so many different photos and video of them that I know these beings are around all the time. Now, I don't know how many dimensions actually there are that coexist within ours, but from what I've heard in my research, up to 16 to 18 different dimensions that happen at one time, even, wherever we're at one point, any time or point or time. So the frequency thing is another thing, or you could call it, vibration. Everything is about frequency and vibration. And, so it's really hard to call that one, but these things, like you said, it's amazing. And then again, it's your point of your mind frame too. If you're not going to believe in something, it might not appear to you, or if you're negative about that these things being existing or not. I've heard lots of horror stories about these beings. As far as I'm concerned, they've never taken from my house. They don't leave hair in my shower. They don't take from our pantry. And I know the little ones were hanging out around with my baby boy because there's no way I could have coaxed him. I'll send you that video as well. But I could have coaxed him or coached him to do what he did. And he did it 2 separate times as a little fella. So one time when David Hollis came down and shot the video from Louisiana, and David Hollis has quite a few groups, and he's got experiences as well with these beings. And it's kind of hard for us because a lot of people always want to make them monsters. And I have a director friend that I went to college with he's the lead director of Chicano Hollywood. He was wanting to come down and shoot videos, and I told him, well, I don't want to make these things monsters because I don't want people to be afraid of them and think, or try and harm them or anything. So I had to think about, the clan and whatnot, and I'm trying, be very careful about my location or whatever, because we have little babies, little twin babies every year, and they take care of them. And yet, I don't want them being disturbed or bothered or anything like that. And then a lot of the, the really, really bad trolls, I'll say, okay, I'll tell you what, you come out here. If you don't believe it, we'll walk out into the field. You leave all your lights and your weapons and everything. And I'll call out for Alpha. He's kind of touchy-feely, but once you get by that, you'll be just fine. But I haven't had anybody take me up on my offer yet. But yeah, I've got him in our room, a photo of him, and a lot of people say, well, that's blurry, it's a shadow. But I've also got the same being outside mock charging the police department when they came here to try and serve a warrant. So yeah, it's a funny thing. It really is. But I know for a fact that these things and these beings exist because I know my 1-year-old son wasn't making things up when he told me about them.
Another really interesting aspect of your storytelling is your story about the pistachios, and I want to get there in a second. But before I do, I'll say that the crossover here with the fairy subject matter is striking. You could easily be telling me a story about a gnome that is in your house or a winged fairy that lives in your garden, and many of the things that you're discussing would echo the type of storytelling and sharing that I've received from so many people now over the past 2 years. So it is really interesting, and I think right up the fascinating Faye alley to be talking to you tonight. And again, I just want to really, appreciate that you've been so open and able to talk so freely about this stuff, because it's so interesting and it's hard to find people to talk to about it, in my experience. Now, this pistachio thing. So when you perceived this kind of figure, as you pointed out, it was something like a predator effect behind the mirror. You had a handful of pistachios and you threw them towards this direction and they came back. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, they flew right back never hit me. They whizzed right by my hand and hit the doorway behind me. And when it did that, it came from its cloaked form, which, like I said, the Predator movie kind of, how it's almost fluid or water, or I call it rainbow hue. This really, and then it went right back to it. I said, aha, I knew you were standing there because I could feel it. I'm an empath, so I feel things. And Terry Jr., explaining the things to us, it got to the point that it was like, I already know Junior, he's standing right behind me. And I've got video where I felt him like breathing on my neck and stuff. And in fact, I was talking to Scott Pace one time. He's another big time Bigfooter and whatnot. He's got his own Kistachi Bigfoot group. And as I'm talking to him on a live feed, they're manifesting like on my face and stuff. He goes, man, I'm trying to catch them on a screenshot, but I'm not quick enough to do that. One point that I wanted to make out is that you can only film or take photos of these beings if they allow you to. You're not going to take a photo of them on accident. The only way you're going to capture them is if they allow it. Because like I said, they're able to manipulate your film. They're able to make you forget. One day I was filming the baby monitor next to me, and the fluid movement of them. All of a sudden I start filming the ceiling, and this is kind of disturbing because I have a little baby in my house, and it's just he and I'm filming the baby monitor to try to capture something walking in the front living room, and all of a sudden I start filming the ceiling for a minute or two. A little bit of time goes by, and then the baby monitor that I'm filming from my phone, while the phone starts filming the ceiling, I reach up and I got a left arm that's not really mobile, and I reach up and I grab the baby monitor that it hands back to me, and I don't ever remember it. I grab the baby monitor, put it back in my lap, and start filming as nothing ever happens. And like I said, I didn't find that footage until I went through my videos, and I've learned to do that now, that when I film, because they can make you forget. I had no memory, no recollection of it whatsoever, but I'd be happy to share those with you as well. And like I said, anything that I say, I came from the school where back in the day, all we had was our word. And, I've always been honest to things. And the thing about it is that, the people that don't understand these things, they're going to make fun of you and say, you're crazy. That's the first thing that everybody says, you're crazy. You're suffering from Prodalia, or you're suffering, you're crazy. And then I don't put, a lot of the Bigfoot stuff on my personal page, on my Facebook page or on my TikTok stuff, because people will tend to give you, oh yeah, that's that crazy guy again, blah blah blah. But anybody that I've showed my video evidence of, it blows them away.
Well, certainly, like I said at the top of the show, and I mean this again now, almost doubly so, there's definitely no convincing of anyone of anything on this show.
Right.
And for those obvious reasons, that certain people are going to be able to understand, their perception will be, I guess, at the point where it makes sense, or they're going to be not able to. And I always say, like, imagine you were blind from birth, and then you're trying to have somebody describe the color blue to you, right? If you've been blind since birth, how does the person who can see the color blue begin to describe the color blue to the person who's blind since birth?
That is an awesome analogy. That is an awesome analogy right there. You hit the nail right on the head.
Well, thanks, Terry.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but there's an awesome point. And like I said, and there again, the doubt about it. And then you're going to tell yourself, I really didn't see that. And with your experience, when what you explained to me is that you were with somebody that saw the exact same thing. And that helps a lot, a lot. It really does. And because right away your mind starts thinking, hey, this couldn't have been real. Am I imagining this, or what is it? And until you stand firm on what you believe in and whatnot, I'm not going to tell anybody about this.
Well, I mean, I have a dear friend who took his own life. Big part of that was he saw and experienced phenomenon, but had a really difficult time explaining it logically and to the satisfaction of his peers and even to himself. And I do think he thought he lost his mind, and he was suffering because of that, and ultimately took his own life. Years later, I had that experience, and it was shared, like you're pointing out. It helps so much, but I immediately understood his isolation when I finally saw something. It was like a switch flipped for me. I said, oh, fuck. That's why he was having that problem. Before, I honestly thought he had lost his mind.
And we mentioned it earlier as we were talking pre-podcast. It's something that affects you to the point that you can't forget it, and it eats on you and it bothers you. That's what it did to me. I started doing research and finding out all the things that I could about the subject. And, I wanted more answers. And now that, I've become, I moderate and administrate in these groups and whatnot. They're great and wonderful people. I invited you to Daryl Denton's group, and he's the Tennessee Bigfoot man. He's got all kinds of YouTube stuff and he's got his own YouTube channel, and he's been invited to podcasts. They do all the big Bigfoot gatherings or whatnot, and they have the guest speakers happen and whatnot. It's amazing that a lot of my stuff hasn't gone viral, but that's the other thing. I think, the platforms are trying, to keep it, the shadow ban people or whatnot. But with some of my stuff, I just cannot believe why it hasn't, taken off a lot bigger or better. And, there are reasons for that too. If you get too close to the light, sometimes they shut your light off or make sure that you don't say anything more about it. And I have to be careful one has to be careful to protect, well, like I said, our clan, and to protect your family and whatnot. Because if they want you to be quiet, they can certainly do that.
I think you might be right about that stuff too. Yeah, the analogy of like, how do you describe the color blue to someone who's never seen color is what it's like to try to describe your ability to perceive this stuff to somebody who can't. That's why we don't try to convince anybody on Fascinating Fae, because it's not the blind person's fault that they don't understand the color blue. It's just a function of perception. I do think that the perceptive abilities into this realm or into this dimension, whatever you want to phrase it as, is either a genetic predisposition that some people have like a different kind of protein in their eye that helps them perceive this. There's analogs in quantum biology with the European robin, which can actually see the magnetic pull on electrons from the poles of the Earth. And so it can actually see electrons bending either to the left or to the right. I'm paraphrasing here, but it can follow what it can see with its eyes to navigate even in a huge storm and stay on course. And it's doing that using quantum physics and a function of its biology. And I wonder, like, if everybody on Earth has an ancestral protein structure, DNA code that enables perception, and that for whatever reason, like any unused part of your body, like if you never walk, your legs are going to atrophy. And if you never exercise this function, it may also correspondingly atrophy. And if you wake it up, it may also grow in strength. Just like if you work a muscle, it's going to get bigger. There's a lot of the human physiology which is modifiable, and that includes how our brains work, how our eyes work, I really do believe. And so when you get exposed, it's kind of like catching a virus, it sounds like I'm talking about, but it is in a way, because once you get exposed, you're now changed. Mm-hmm. And actually something about you has changed physically. That's why it's so hard to get past it.
Right.
If it was just like a disturbing event, a lot of disturbing events happen in people's lives. I mean, fuck, I've gone through some terrible shit, and it doesn't stick with me and annoy me and leave me feeling unresolved like the stuff that I've seen and experienced prior to this show and during the making of this show.
Exactly.
How on earth, is this the truth, is a big part of the problem of it all. Because then you now also have all these other questions about, is the knowledge about this subject matter widely held but being kept from us? Is it something fully understood by certain populations of people who are elite and we're not able to access it because it's being kept from us? Or do people in positions of power have no idea about this stuff and therefore it's not being taken seriously? What's the truth? Where can you fit an understanding of this subject matter into a nice package and put it on your shelf? You know what I mean?
Right. And that's the $1 million question right there, because why is it that they don't want us to know? I have been able to teach people in our groups. In fact, they've even said, thank you, Terry, for helping me see. And I explained to them what things to look for. And some people just have it. I have a friend in Australia her favorite game was finding Waldo, and she can find so many different things in a photo that would just blow you away, you know. So, and how I did that was I wanted to find out who the best seers were in the group, so I challenged them. I sent them all the same photo, and I said, okay, do me a favor and pick out what you see, and then we'll exchange notes on this and see, you know. But this little gal that I asked to be my an advisor for me, and when I have questions about anything or what she sees in the photo, I'll send them to her. Now, sometimes the really obvious, she kind of overlooks, but I call her, she's got like microscopic view. And then there's this other gal that I call, she's from Australia as well. I call her Eagle Eye, and she's also a knower. She just knows things for some reason, you know, and whatnot. She just knows these things, and I'm like, how do you know this? She goes, I don't know. I've been that way all of my life. I just know things. So we have seers and we have knowers, but I know seers are able to be taught to see, because I've helped a lot of people what to look for. And like I said, once again, the rainbow hue, no matter what type of being they are, whether they're a gnome, whether they're a fairy, whether they're a Bigfoot or perhaps a skinwalker, these things put off this rainbow type of hue in their fur and whatnot. And I also believe that's what helps them to be able to be invisible or cloak or whatnot.
You know, the frequency thing, just to kind of jump in here, because I forgot to say this earlier, and it's something I don't want to forget. Like, you know, there's like a device that's used to deter teenagers from hanging out in front of convenience stores called the mosquito. And what it is it's an ultrasonic frequency device that plays a tone that's close to 20,000 hertz. 20,000 hertz being the upper limit of a human's hearing. And that tone is extremely high pitched, like higher than a mosquito, and it's super annoying. And as a person ages, naturally, the ability to hear into that frequency is lost around the age of 35 to 40 for most individuals. And so this device plays this high frequency sound. If a teenager comes to the front of the store, the teenager within 5 minutes is like, fuck it, this is such an annoying sound, I'm out of here.
Right.
But an adult who's older literally does not perceive the sound whatsoever and is not bothered by it at all. And there's like a obvious known range of human hearing from about, and going up to 20,000 hertz and then peaking out. That doesn't mean there's not sound beyond 20,000 hertz. That doesn't mean there's not frequencies and information surrounding you right now that is higher than you can hear. And that is a normal thing, like part of just Earth, no paranormal needed. By the same measure, there are wavelengths of light that you cannot see with your naked eye.
Exactly. And I heard Walmart was experiencing or was playing around with that as well. They're putting new lights in the store or something that makes you, get in there and get out, so you're not milling around the store so much. I heard they're experimenting with light frequency as well. So they've got to know something about something,
There's many applications today that utilize wavelengths or frequencies outside of the human ability to perceive, but that still have an effect on people. There's, even a quite robust set of patents for high frequency sound weapons that can use sound frequency to, create emotional states or other physical reactions in humans and other animals when they're deployed.
Right.
And some of these you can hear, but some of them you can't hear. Infrasound would be like the opposite of a high frequency, which would be low frequency vibrations. Also, many frequencies at the lower end of the spectrum are unable to be perceived, but that doesn't mean that they're not there. So if there's real information from real sources, such as frequencies of sound or frequencies of light, that we can detect, measure, understand, harness, and make use of, and we can't see any of them unless we use special tools, how is it any different using a camera to effectively capture something that is invisible to our naked eye. At the same time, is our naked eye as naked as we think, or does it actually have quantum capability which can be woken up? I'm just kind of speculating here, but I think that part of the key to understanding what an interdimensional is lies within the basic understanding of frequencies outside of our normal perception here on Earth. As soon as you understand that, there's a sound happening right now and I just can't hear it, but it doesn't mean the sound isn't here. Now you can start to understand how could a entity be in the same space as you and you not be able to perceive it. It's as simple as that as far as I'm concerned.
That's a phenomenal viewpoint right there. Phenomenal. Absolutely. And it makes absolute sense to me because, like I said, until you point out some things and bring up some things, people couldn't see this. And then, like I said, I've had people say, "Thank you, Terry, for teaching me to see. I'm a seer now." And anytime somebody says, "Hey, look at this in this photo," I make a joke out of them, and I'm like, "Seer, seer," and kind of laugh about it. But it's amazing because people that couldn't see before are now seeing these things. And once you do, like you said, it affects you to where I look at a photo. And so many people send me things to say, "Do you see anything in this, or is this something, or whatnot?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'll send you," and send them back to him. But yeah, I said, and there's ways that I can show you how to be able to see these things. And then I explained how to find things like on the Google Earth 3D and the Street View things that just shouldn't be there. Why are they there? Like I said, I've got alpha 15 foot tall, and I know the measurements are right because I've tested the tools that I use to verify my statements. And to me, like I said, I don't want anybody thinking I'm crazy. I don't want anybody trolling me, or my family or anything like that, because I do know for a fact the experiences that I have, and there would be no reason for me to try to manipulate people, or scare them with these type of things. But what my point is that I want them to know that these beings do exist, and they're, for the most part, with my experience, now I can't talk for anybody else, but my experience, they are friendly and they are cordial, and they're just always here.
In the same way that we can perceive them in a limited fashion and sometimes in a not so limited fashion, I wonder, there's a bit of a thought jumble here, but I'll try my best. We think of ourselves as physical. We have to eat and poop and breathe and drink water and stuff. So we kind of think of ourselves as physical. But when we think about these entities, we think about them perhaps as not as physical. I wonder if in their perception of themselves, they just feel as physical as we do, but maybe they have a better understanding that that's an illusion. And if that's the missing piece that makes the skill set between one entity class and the humans differ, is truly just understanding of the illusory nature of reality. If we can come to accept that our own reality, as inescapably physical as it is still an illusion, there's a switch that can flip in your brain that I think brings you into alignment with the thinking process of the entities that you're interacting with. And when the two minds can understand the illusory nature of reality, there's a crossover, or a like you're talking about, like a cohabitation almost, that I do think is a real phenomenon. If you had talked to me in 2018 and you told me you had Bigfoot living in your house, my eyes would have glazed over, and I would have asked you to check your medicine.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, people will criticize what they don't understand or don't comprehend, and they can be very, very mean. All my life, I grew up, "Oh yeah, you're the Bigfoot guy," rah, 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 making fun of me, whatever, And like I said, once it affects you in that way, you just can't think of anything else. Like I said, as soon as that happened to me, I started doing all the research I could. I had the experience here in the house. I knew that I know what to look for when it comes to footprints. In fact, at one point in time, I had video evidence of what would have been the world record, because the world record is still 13 prints consecutively in the Himalayas. What they believed to be a Yeti. There were 13 prints, and then they just vanished into nowhere. Well, I had 24 of them that were like 24 inches, running across a freshly plowed hayfield. And I documented that evidence, and somehow that phone disappeared from my jacket pocket at another time while I was in the city. I had it, I put it in my jacket pocket, and the phone just disappeared. I couldn't find it anywhere again. So there again, I wondered, if something jumped through the frequency and took that phone. I've also had the notebook that I videotaped the camera trap with. It was stepped on or somehow crushed in a place that it could not have been crushed. I had files taken off of it, and it wasn't even online. And there were like 120 files removed from that notebook. And I lost a lot of my data and some of my videos and stuff, as well as the one, like I said, of the 24 footprints consecutively. Now, there were 5 toes. There was the mid-tarsal break and the heel strike. And I've got some that I've got my son standing in one that somebody did the math for me, and they said this thing would be as tall as 2 telephone poles, and it would weigh as much as a whale, whatever made those prints. And I had 3 of them consecutively, and the distance that it stepped away from each other was like some 13 foot. So this is like something huge. And like I said, I know that these beings come out when it's raining, generally at night when nobody can see them. And I haven't got him on I've got my surveillance footage out there. I've caught other things on it, but I still haven't quite got a chance to capture it yet. But something big walks around here, and I've seen it down where I used to live. I had another resident some, mile and a half, 2 miles down the road from where I live now. And that's what got me started, using the Google Earth 3D thing to look for these things. And like I said, I found lots of weird things that, people should question, but they don't. And that the lady, being kind of sarcastically, is supposedly, and I kind of explained to her the reason I was inquiring. She was like, yeah, you got to be off your rocker. And the first thing that they're going to say is you're on drugs, or you better check your meds, or you're crazy. Don't watch out for the guys in the straitjacket thing. And I've learned how to deal with that and handle it now. And with the evidence that I have, now, hardly anybody can tell me that I'm not being honest about the things that I say.
I certainly feel like the real genuine feeling from you. I get like a really genuine feeling, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I like that you want to back up what you're saying with evidence. And I like that, rightfully so, like you are not claiming understanding, and you're talking about these interrelated experiences which might at first glance seem a little bit much for the uninitiated. But to me, it's funny because a lot of what you're saying tracks, makes sense, and follows an emerging pattern of understanding that I'm developing around the phenomenon. And, not the least of which is just this like idea of kind of cohabitation. One of the questions that I kind of want to ask as we start to wind this conversation down. I mean, honestly, this has been a fascinating conversation already. I could probably talk to you for 5 hours.
Absolutely.
I try my best for respect for the audience, respect for your time, to keep them to around 2 hours. So, but what I wanted to ask is this. Why do you feel or think that they are around your house? What do you feel the purposes of, whatever comes up for you is valid. I'm just really curious what you think it's about. I ask this for anybody who's got entities that are there, frequently around. I'm just wondering in your case why you think they are there.
Well, the fact that I've tracked them back clear to, like I said, my mom and dad's wedding photo. What I think they are is they are protectors or watchers. And we have portals. Now, you hear portals all the time. And I believe what they do is they make sure and protect. They always seem to be around the portals. And I think they protect bad entities from, coming around and like I said, I know I've been protected by them before. I didn't have general knowledge of it at the time, but in doing my research and talking to people friending people that are seers and knowers and asking lots of questions, and finding out things in my research, I think that they're watchers and they protect human beings. I mean, I've heard lots of stories about how, there was a little girl lost, or this person was, needed something and they helped out, or there was a hurt one and we helped it out. And, I kind of think that perhaps maybe, I know my grandfather, he knew like 5 different languages. He had the technology of the Egyptians because he knew how to use ropes and pulleys. And then he had equestrianship of the Egyptians. I think maybe that this clan of Bigfoot adopted my family. And they're like a protector, like your guardian angel thing or whatnot. And I think that they back up the angels because, there are principalities of the air that cannot touch the ground. And that's why I call these celestial terrestrial, because they belong here. They make a footprint and they're hunting deer and they can procreate. Like I said, I've got photos of little baby ones. I've got photos of my son interacting with them. He explains on a video 100% about what they look like. They have hair on their face and on their arms. And they have big feet. And in my video, I really didn't catch the Bigfoot thing that he was explaining that to me. I thought he was just playing with his shoe, until somebody said, he's telling me. And then the camera glitches for a split second. And then he points something at me, like points at something like it's standing right behind me. And, it's phenomenal. And I think that's why I think they're protectors. They watch the portals really closely. I know one time I witnessed them fighting with aliens because I believe that the Greys steal the Bigfoot babies and make them slaves and things. And I've got video photo evidence of that. And that was the night that I had just so happened that my wife captured a UFO right over the top of our house with this little, I want to call it a drone, like tail, or a something that, like, how you got something, and how like the government runs a something to distract or whatever behind to make sure, it's kind of what it reminded me of. And then I've also seen the same type of footage on some of the UFO groups back east and whatnot. In fact, the lady that sent me the analogy or the video of the two beings flying around, that they could have been fireflies, but fireflies turn off and on, and these things were constantly lit. And like I said, the aerial acrobatics that they were performing was nothing of this world or to me, and a lot of people said that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I talked to a guy who had an orb sighting on Mount Shasta, and he describes this kind of like aerial acrobatics, for lack of a better word, very similar to the description that you're sharing with me now. I've heard a lot of people talk about the speed and the weird, like almost putting on a show. In his case, he was talking about how the lights would kind of cross and appear to emanate from within one another, like they would come together and then separate, but very, very rapidly, like 50 miles an hour with extreme precision.
Oh, yeah.
Just before we kind of move on to some of the wrap-up questions that I like to ask everybody, I'll just go back a quick second to some of the stuff you said about the ability for these Bigfoot to manipulate imagery and technology files, things like this. That's something you don't have to tell me. I have seen with my own 2 eyes really, really strange manipulations of my own machine. And I've spoken to like people that, one woman stands out in my mind right away here, which is Liz from Australia. She's an orb photographer. And this woman at this point has put up 5,000 plus photographs, super high quality photographs of orbs. And, it's interesting because it's, in her perspective, the orbs themselves post photo manipulating the digital file in order to allow themselves to be appeared, which is so similar to how you assessed and described what a Bigfoot is doing. I also find it really fascinating, the idea that they move so fast that they might be able to actually touch your phone or touch a camera and not be perceived. Because I have often struggled with the idea of how are they moving objects? How, like your phone disappearing from your coat pocket. This is not an unusual thing as well. Objects being lost from a secure or known location. Similarly, objects being lost from a secure known location and then subsequently returning into a very obvious place that had been looked at and looked over 10 times in the search for this object, and then out of nowhere, here's the object. Like a guy loses his car keys, he doesn't know how he lost them, he had them in his pocket. He's looking so much that he actually gets his car rekeyed for $400, comes home from that,
sitting right there on the counter or something, right?
Literally on the living room floor.
Right, exactly. Yep. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, I have dozens of those stories, which have quickly become some of my most favorite things to hear about, because actually the disappearing, reappearing object or apporting object phenomenon, to me, is the biggest mindfuck of them all, because how are they doing that? How are they getting something? Like another one that comes to mind is this gentleman Lapis that I spoke to. He was an artist and he had like a big art trunk, like, you know, like a trunk on the ground for your clothes. He had a trunk full of art supplies. And one day, him and his grandmother, they were living in a trailer home. They left the trailer home in the following sequence. He went outside. She came out behind him and locked the door. They got in the car. They went to the grocery store. They got out. She got out of the car first. She went up to the doorway, opened the door. And when she opened the door, inside the living room, there was a perfectly symmetrical line of about a dozen stones in a perfect circle around his art supply box. No forced entry into the home, no open windows, everything was locked. He left before his grandma and it wasn't there. He came in after his grandma and it was there. He watched his grandmother open the door. He watched his grandmother leave. The stones weren't there. It's so interesting. Like, how do they get some stones from the gravel driveway, move them through the wall, and put them in a circle around the box? And furthermore, why? What's the message? You know, what are they attempting to communicate other than we are here, and here's a physical mind bender for you to ponder, like a gift, like an existential crisis gift that we're going to give you. So yeah, they do actually move things, in my opinion.
Right. And they're not limited to space. They're not limited to space, time, or place.
Yeah, and that's why it's so difficult to understand, because we are limited to all of those things.
Exactly.
It's like trying to understand something that's antithetical to what you perceive reality to be, and then in coming to accept that there might be an uber reality, or a level of reality that is real but is not as readily perceived, is a mindfuck. It's just a straight up mindfuck. It will never be anything but.
Yeah.
How you reconcile it is a very personal matter. I think personally, after speaking with you for an hour here today, you're doing a great job, honestly. I get a real warmth from you. I get a real curiosity from you. And most importantly, I love that you are not saying that you're not trying to sell a Bigfoot, seer course for $1,000, like that's critical.
I'm not looking to make money off of it. Like I said, I just want the general knowledge of people to know that these things are around. They're okay. They're not as bad. Like I said, in my experience, they're not as bad as one may think. They have little babies that they have to keep warm and take care of. And my video evidence stuff there. I also have told people that, like I said, in my clan, to protect people or watch over them as well. Anybody that I call my own. And I have a friend from the Bigfoot place or a group that she's blind, and I don't know how she sees, but she goes, I can't explain it to you, but I feel vibration, I see and whatnot. She goes, do you have any idea what this bead is about? And I said, first of all, she goes, it was placed on my front step. And I said, was it placed exactly in the middle, like right on the money in the middle? Because these beings, they're like that. They'll put something right in the center. And she goes, yeah. She goes, it's a bead. And I said, is it made out of turquoise? And she kind of freaks out. She goes, that's kind of creepy there. Yeah, it is turquoise, as a matter of fact. And I said, well, the only place that has turquoise is a little mine about 50 miles from where I live, and that would be something to prove to you that that's probably the only place that it could have come from. Well, she's got 3 or 4 beads just like it lately, and it bewilders her. But the fact that I asked them to watch this lady and protect her, and then I said they're going to let you know somehow that they're there. And now she's really comfortable. She moved from the place that she was at having difficulty with it, but now where she's at, she's really comfortable, and she knows they're around. It doesn't bother her a bit now. And like me, I'm comfortable. I know that they're not trying to steal my son. They're not trying to eat all of our food. They're not. They're very polite in what I asked them to do. And at first, people think demons or, you need to exorcise these things away. And when I wasn't able to do that, and I realized they're making a footprint, they belong here. I was a lot more accepted. When the mama brings the baby into the house to keep warm, I quit locking my doors, and I'm pretty sure they probably don't even need. But it opened the door. You saw the video. It opens the door and closes the door, and it picks up 2 things. And yeah, it looks like a dark shadow, but it's standing right in front of the porch light. So there's no way that that. And then you can tell by the size. I don't know if I sent you the size reference from the same angle and the same the same location and angle, but I have my wife standing to do a size reference, and you can tell this is not somebody in an ape suit. You can tell it is not. And then when I switch the slow motion part of it, you can hear the vocalizations and the deep sounds that it makes. No way it can be human.
Truly, your videos were really interesting. And one thing that the audience listening can look forward to is I will be linking some of these videos that are referenced here today in the show notes, with Terry being so kind as to share them with us. Terry, what I'll do here, again, this is just only a matter of respect for everyone's time, not because I want to stop talking, but I'll, in the next few minutes here, kind of move us towards the conclusion of this conversation. One of the things that I like to ask anybody who comes on the show, and of course tonight we've been talking, about Bigfoot primarily, but as I've, I think been pretty clear, I think they are kind of like a fae. With that kind of context for my question, what I'd like to ask again, and we've talked about it a lot, but this is just a chance for you to give me all your thoughts and feelings in one place. What do you think fairies are?
I believe they're not a mythological creature because there's been so many sightings of them. From what I understand and what I've drawn a conclusion to is that the little smaller the entity are, the more powerful the magic is. And you don't want to mess with the fairies because they, like you said, they travel so fast, they could hit you like the equivalent. Well, imagine if a hummingbird flew and rammed its beak into you. Well, these things are probably 100 times faster than a hummingbird. So if you're messing with them or trying to annoy them in any way, it would be a bad idea. Other than that, I think they just they're a part of, whatever frequency they are in. My experience with the Bigfoot itself, they don't want to bring any attention to themselves. They're not out kidnapping children or doing anything malice. The ones that I'm familiar with. Now, the Sasquatch might be a different story, but I think they're just a part of our universe that that very, very few actually get to experience. But when they do, like we both said, it is so life-changing and so makes our mind think so hard that you're never the same after it. And it causes people to research, to find out what these things are. And I've done this, I've become part of like the Bigfoot, family and whatnot. And what I notice about these people is they seem to be very, very friendly. Unless, you start contradicting the things that they're saying and you try and make them look, but anybody's going to do that when somebody doesn't believe you. And I also understand that a certain percentage of people are unable to see these things. And that's why you have to be just as responsible and not trying to cram stuff like that down somebody's throat or, or doing anything to degrade their character or their personality in itself. And like you want to say, you stupid dummy, blah 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 blah. No. And what I do as a moderator in the groups is I explain to people, you know what? Only a certain percentage of people can actually see these things, and once you do, you're affected by it to the point that I will never look at a photo the same way again. And I got a magnifying glass, and this helps a lot. I got a magnifying glass on my phone, and when people send me photos, the first thing I start looking for are dark figures with the rainbow hue in it if they're looking for Bigfoot. Or if there's there again, the fairies will make a pixie dust trail, and so certainly they know about this because everybody knows the most popular fairy, which would probably be Tinkerbell. And the way that this being or the fairy that I caught on an iPhone capture while I was filming the baby monitor reminded me of Tinkerbell and how it flew and then instantly stopped for one split second and then flew off, and then it left a little tracer tail, behind it. Made me think it's got to absolutely be a fairy or something of that nature.
That last part is like word for word almost the way I describe mine, and the instant stopping is one of the weirdest things you'll ever see.
Oh yeah, how can they do that? Right. How can they stop in mid-flight and they stop for one split second and then it's take off again? It's phenomenal.
That's a very accurate description. I love your answer about what fairies are, and not the least of which is that it changes you. That's a big part of their identity, is that they are a type of thing that when you encounter it, you're going to be changed. Well, Terry, what I'll do here now is I'll just spend about 1 minute doing my podcaster wrap-up housekeeping. Hang tight while I do that. I always give my guests the last word as I go to sign off from the episode. So just if you'd be so kind, let me just say goodbye to everybody here tonight, and then we'll get to your last word.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Well, everybody, you've been listening tonight to Fascinating Fae. I'm your host, Jim. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, please shoot me an email at encounters@fascinatingfae.com, and you can also find the show on all of the common socials at that username, Fascinating Fae. With nothing more of value that I could add tonight, and not that I don't have more questions, but I just don't have time for them. What I will say is that on behalf of all of our human and non-human listeners, super big thanks to Terry from Colorado for coming on the show. Terry, thanks a lot for being here. I really appreciate this conversation with you tonight, my man.
You're very much welcome. And if you want to do another session at another time, I'd be happy to do that. Like I said, I'm very open-minded towards these things. And I would just tell the listening audience, once you get past existence, it kind of opens up. The sky is the limit to so many things that we cannot explain on our earth. And some can be so closed-minded that they don't want to see these things, and no matter what, it's going to be something they don't want to have any part of, and that's fine too. But like for us that have had these experiences, it's better to talk about it and find people like you've reached out. I'm glad that you've started this podcast because it helps a lot of people understand that, we're not making up stories and telling lies. And there'd be no point in that for me. And then, like I said, everything I try to say, I've got video evidence or backup of what I'm talking about. Like the video, like I said, of my son on the bed, that no way I could have coached a 1-year-old to do what he did. And his first words were alfalfa and bruh. That's the only way he could explain it. But now he knows that they're Bigfoot. And now that he's so fluent and can talk, he they probably erase him too, and then so he can't see him like he used to. But as a small baby, I knew that he had abilities to be able to see things that nobody else could as a small child. And I was kind of like that myself. And I have memories or thoughts of something that like I know that happened before or whatever, maybe a deja vu, or maybe it really did happen in another life or something there. But there's so many things that they don't allow us to know that actually do exist. I just want people in general to know that these things exist. There are a lot more of them than we even realize. And, not to be afraid, and just ask them nicely if they're bothering you or whatever, not to bother you.
So they say I'm a seeker, to feast on the food of the gods, drawn to the call of the teacher, set to reveal the facade. In a starlit night, and a mountainside, and a sacrament, behold, and a forest shrine, to explore this life and dance with the vine of the souls. Go I may, well, I don't know what waits up on the hill, but I'm on my way to a warm embrace, and I know that I'll change after she's through, and I just can't wait for it. So they say I'm a seeker, to feast on the food of the gods, drawn to the call of the teacher, set to reveal the facade. In a starlit night, and a mountainside, and a sacrament, behold, in a forest shrine, to explore this life and dance with the vine of the souls. Go I may, I don't know what waits up on the hill, but I'm on my way to a warm embrace, and I know that I'll change after she's through, and I just can't wait for it. And the sights I've seen echoed in my wildest dreams, in the places I have been, echoed in my wildest dreams, my wildest dreams, my wildest dreams.